Two of the biggest challenges in chess are figuring out if you want to keep a particular piece or pieces, or if you want to exchange them. The second challenge is where you actually want to put your pieces if you keep them. So first, do we want to keep? And if we want to keep, where do we put them? So we make sure that the pieces work for us and not against us. I have chosen a very instructive sideline from the King's Indian defense. In this position, it is white's turn, and white has two moves we want to look into. So for one, the white can play d5 and attack this knight on c6. And now black has to face a crucial decision. Where does he put his knight? Well, obviously, black can play knight e7, but here we see that this knight is actually looking a little bit misplaced because black is really slow with creating counterplay. For example, knight e8, f5 for the typical break. But on the other hand, it's not even clear if black will have the typical counterplay on the king side. So knight e7 is a very dangerous move. Of course, there's also knight b8, but you should ask yourself the question, why do you start with the passive moves and why not with the active moves? So knight to d4 looks rather bad, if you ask me, at first sight. Why? White can just take and maybe play knight to e2 or just take with the queen. Well, and this is exactly the reason why I said it looks bad at first sight, because this queen takes d4 is actually a very big mistake. Here, black can play the typical move, knight takes e4, and now the queen is attacked, and at the same time, the queen cannot really capture on e4 because of rook e8, and black will have too much material. White is utterly lost. White cannot go for this variation. And if he takes and plays knight to e2, it's again a very dangerous position. Here, black might have several good setups, such as rook to e8, putting pressure on this pawn, or playing c5. So obviously, knight takes d4 is not a good choice. Better moves are bishop e3 or bishop to g4. Okay, this is one thing white can play, but white can also take on e5. And now we need to ask us the crucial decision. Do we take with the pawn, d takes e5, or do we take with the knight and possibly accept the exchange of lots of pieces? Now here, not so clear if black will have enough material to even play for some. Okay, but let us go deeper into this position and try to come up with an objective evaluation. So first of all, we see the c-pawn is blocked by this knight. So there might be a reason to take with the knight on e5 to unblock your c-pawn. On the other hand, if we look a little bit deeper into the position, we see why keeping this knight on c6 might be very clever. Let's take a look at the pawn structure. White has a pawn on e4 and white has a pawn on c4. This means the control over the crucial d4 square has been weakened, and if black somehow gets a knight there, white will be forced to exchange it with a piece if he decides to exchange it. But we will see this a little bit later. And if black takes with the knight on e5, then obviously the knights can be exchanged. Okay, but so far we have only looked into white's pawn structure. Obviously, we must also see how the pawns are aligned in black's camp. And here we will see a major difference. The c-pawn is still on c7. This means the pawn might go to c6 and control the crucial d5 square. Why crucial? Well, a white knight on d5 might be very unpleasant there and rather strong if it couldn't be driven away. However, as we have figured out, we have c6. So therefore, in the game, d takes e5 is obviously the best move. You do not exchange the knights, and we will see in action why here black is slightly better. So bishop to g5, played by white, is pinning the knight, and white is following a pretty clever strategy. He just wants to get rid of lots of pieces, and then it is unclear if there is anything for black to play. So therefore, the black decided to exchange queens, and this sounds counterintuitive if you ask me. So there was the risk of knight d5, so black decided to exchange the queens. But this is only half of the story, because after the exchange of queens, there is a rook on d1, and black can play bishop to g4, pinning the knight. And now it becomes clear. Black is playing for the d4 square. Black wants to play knight to d4, and black doesn't want the knight to be taken. Possibly the loss of the e-pawn, also not so pleasant. So, therefore, bishop to g4. So why does black need to choose this order? Well, let's imagine we played bishop g4 immediately. Queen takes d1, rook takes d1. Now you see there's nothing pinned here. If white wanted to, he could move his knight. White could also play something like knight to d5. And obviously black wanted to avoid that and therefore exchanged queens and played bishop to g4. Now white continued with his plan. White took on f6 and bishop takes on f6. Now d5 was played. And this is another very crucial moment. Where do we want to put our bishop? And obviously, do we want to defend the c7 pawn? Because black will have a lot of counterplay, even if the c7 pawn is taken. The question is it necessary to sacrifice it? So let's take a look into the variations. Black has bishop to d8. And here, as most of my students say, this doesn't look good because now the connection of the rooks is somehow disturbed and they are not connected anymore. Also, the a rook doesn't look too good. This is a fair point. However, one really needs to dig deep and ask him or herself the question, is the d8 square the permanent destination of the bishop? And the clear answer is no. Why? Let's say white plays what was played in the game, and this is h3, a very bad move. To be honest, rook d3 or something like that had been much better. So pawn h3, bishop takes f3. This is a move black wanted to play anyway, and white was confronted with all the time. Even without playing h3, black might have some incentives to take on f3. Okay, let's continue with the game. Bishop takes f3, and now knight to d4. And now you see why having c6 is so important, and why having the knight is good. Our knight, now the black knight, is on d4, attacks the bishop. The bishop must be defended, or can only retreat to g2. Defending with e3 looks a little bit risky to me. Bishop to g2 was played anyway. And now pawn to c6. The knight goes to c6, to c3, pardon me, and bishop to a5. So now you see the bishop on g7, which was staring at the own pawn on e5, now has been developed to a5 and is putting pressure on the knight on c3. And white has a really hard time finding good moves here. Why? Let's imagine white just castles. This is already costing a pawn. Bishop takes c3, b takes c3, knight e2 check, king h2, and this pawn here can be taken. Alternatively, if black wants to avoid any sort of counterplay, also rook f to d8 might be a good choice. And obviously black in this position is completely dominating the white player. White has a very hard time. And if we look into this position, what you basically recognize is a dominating knight and a rather bad bishop on g2. White has several pawns on the light squares, so this light squared bishop is not the greatest piece, if you ask me. Additionally, the pawn structure of white will be damaged. So let's go back and see the crucial moments. So here, the very first crucial moment after d takes e5 is to capture back with the pawn. This is the most important. Black captures back with the knight. You will never get the knight to d4, and the position is very equal. However, as you have seen, after d takes e5, knight to d4, pawn c6, white is really struggling to find any idea to keep the game going into his preferred direction. So the positions he is going to be in might be already very dangerous, and white really needs to pay attention to what he is doing. As we saw in the game, bishop g5, queen takes d1, rook takes d1, bishop g4, and bishop takes f6 is just not the right plan in my opinion. And here, black, for the moment, is disturbing the connection of the rooks. But as you saw, in just 3 moves, black gets to play, or 4 moves, sorry, black gets to play knight d4, pawn c6, bishop a5, and will be completely dominating the game. Black is already better in this position, even if white chose the better rook to d3. Well, maybe just take, play knight to d4, and now c6 is coming anyway. Black is in a very good position and actually already enjoys a pretty decent advantage. So I hope you like this video. This is a very important topic because putting your pieces on the right squares is especially important for the middle game and end game. It starts in the opening, but it's really crucial for the middle game and end game. And exchanging the right pieces obviously is important. I hope you liked this video. If you did so, feel free to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. See you in the next video.